What's good, y'all? Welcome back to my channel, Chrissyy Talks. Y'all call me Chrissyy, and y'all, I'm excited for this video. I fucking love Halloween. We are in the spooky season, and I thought what better way to celebrate than to tell some true crime stories that happen on Halloween night. Not gonna lie, I'm excited for this one. I'm sure some of you guys are gonna like it. So with that being said, grab your blankets, grab your PJs, grab your cup of wines, grab your joints, and let's go ahead and get into the video. Now, this story surrounds Doreen Erbert, who was born Doreen Ray Hitchens, 1952 in Santa Clara, California. She was raised in what was described to be a loving, tight-knit family, and her second husband, Charles Erbert, described her to be an angel who was giving, and whenever she smiled and laughed, you couldn't help but love her. Now, Doreen worked in a career of medicine, and she would eventually work as a physical therapist in the Bay Area. Around that time, she began dating her first husband, William Michael Dennis, who went by Mike, and he worked as a sprayer at a nearby Lockheed factory. Now, Mike suffered from a hearing loss at a young age, which caused him to stutter. Back then, he had to wear one of those hearing aids that were so big it would stick out of your pocket and had a wire around it. So he didn't really interact with a lot of people. He mostly stuck to himself, didn't really hold conversation. He also suffered from depression and told his psychiatrist that he had a hard time finding a girlfriend. But this would later change when he met Doreen, and he thought that she was the one. After just a few months of dating, the two got married, and Doreen would later give birth to a baby boy named Paul Dennis. Now, even though Mike enjoyed being a father, the stress of being young parents and a young couple would soon later lead on to their divorce in 1977. However, according to court documents, Mike was not happy about the divorce and was still bitter about them separating. But this did not stop Doreen, who quickly jumped into her second marriage with a local carpet store owner, Charles Erbert. Here is Onyx, so none of you guys are scared. Now, by 1979, just 2 years after Doreen and Mike separated, Charles and Doreen had a daughter named Doreen Erbert, and they would raise her and Paul together. 1 year after Deanna was born, in February 1980, Paul was only 4 years old at the time. He climbed through a fence that surrounded the family's swimming pool and fell into the water. Now, Doreen was home at the time, but she didn't find Paul until it was too late. After Paul was pulled from the pool, he had to be put on life support for a week, and just 3 days later, after the doctors removed the respirators and the feeding tubes from his body, he unfortunately passed away. Now, of course, this was a devastating loss for the whole family, but it seemed to actually hit Mike the worst. And Mike actually blamed Doreen for the death of their son. He genuinely believed in his heart that she had something to do with their son's death, so much so that he believed that she murdered him and actually filed a wrongful death suit against Charles and Doreen. So I'm sure you guys already can imagine how fucked up it is to, one, have to undergo your son's death, but then to also have to undergo a wrongful death suit filed by your ex-husband and baby's father. 2 years after Paul's death, the case went into trial in March of 1982. The Erberts actually beat the case, and they cut off all ties with Mike. Within the next 2 years following the case, Michael's mental health in his life went downhill. He actually lost his job as a sprayer and had to take a salary reduction in order to stay at the factory. Worst of all, he was being eaten alive over a breakup with a woman who he thought was the love of his life, and also believed murdered their son. Now, while Mike was having trouble with his past, in 1984, Doreen and Charles would be focusing on their future, as she would be welcoming another baby boy after suffering 2 miscarriages after Paul's death. And the baby would be due right after Halloween in early November. Now, on Halloween night, October 31st, 1984, Doreen was 8 months pregnant, and she took her 4-year-old daughter, Deanna, out trick-or-treating while her husband, Charles, stayed at home to pass out candy. When Doreen and Deanna returned, Charles would then go out to get more candy and stop by a liquor store, and he later told police that he was only gone for 15 minutes, which makes me believe that whoever entered their home later that night was waiting for the perfect opportunity to catch Doreen. Now, around 9 p.m. that night, there was a loud knock on the door, and according to Doreen's daughter Deanna, she would later describe this knock to be a little bit more aggressive than just an average knock. When Doreen opened the door, there stood a man in a wolf mask holding an 18-inch machete, and he said the words, "I am going to kill you." I could only imagine how scary that was. I would literally shit my pants. According to Deanna, Doreen told the man to get out of her house and told Deanna to go hide behind the couch, which was smart. Now, when Charles returned home just 15 minutes later, he would find his door unlocked and found Doreen laying in the entryway and their unborn son in the living room. Doreen was hit several times in the head and the body with the 18-inch long machete. Her left hand was completely severed off, and her 8-month-old was removed from her stomach and quote-unquote hacked to pieces. It was so so much blood that Charles actually slipped and fell in it. But fortunately enough, he found Deanna alive and well and still hiding behind the couch in the living room, which means that whatever happened that night, Deanna was most likely there and witnessed the whole thing, or at least heard it. When first responders arrived at the scene, they found Charles, of course, hysterical and covered in blood. Retired San Jose detective Bert Carroll stated that the hallway was red and there stood a stool with a pumpkin on it. At the front door, they found a wolf mask described to have exaggerating teeth, bulging eyes, and a stuck-out tongue. Now, along with the mask, police found a blood trail that led all the way down the block, but suddenly stopped. So police assumed that the killer got into the car and drove away from the scene. However, investigators were able to collect blood samples from the scene that could match to the perpetrator. Now, Doreen surprisingly still had a pulse at the scene, but unfortunately she would die just on the way to the hospital, and I can't even imagine how she was still alive after that attack. Officers, of course, took in Charles for questioning. As you guys know, a lot of the time when a significant other has died, usually police will look into their partner. And another team of investigators would question and talk to the neighbors, who I'm sure heard something that night. Now, when police learned about Charles and Doreen's past with Mike and Paul's death, officers were quickly on their way to Mike's house, which was only 2 miles down the road. Now, I'm sorry, this just blew me because I feel like I couldn't take no chances to be living 2 miles down the street from an ex who genuinely blames me for our son's death, and I'm pregnant, moving on with my life, with my family. I could not take the chances. So it was surprising to me to learn that Mike was only 2 miles down the street. And I also feel like this gave him the more advantage of being close to the home, so being able to travel to Doreen's house quickly if he needed to, and also being able to drive away from her house quickly if he needed to. One officer recounted looking into Mike's truck with a flashlight and seeing blood everywhere, all over the steering wheel, the key, and the gear shift knob. Mike didn't initially answer the door when police knocked, but the police saw that the lights were on and the water was on, so they assumed that he was trying to wash away any evidence. And the police knocked on Mike's door again. This time he answered in a robe. They informed Mike that his ex-wife had been murdered, and according to the police, Mike didn't really know how to react to the news. But nonetheless, he invited them inside so they could discuss further details surrounding his ex-wife's death. Now, investigators noticed that he had a bandage on his right hand, to which Mike responded that he got it from playing with a knife. He went ahead and told the police that he had nothing to hide and they could go ahead and search his home. Police found blood throughout his whole house and his clothes that just did not match up with a simple cut from playing with a knife. And keep in mind, they also saw the blood in his truck already. So from the truck to his house, this cut from playing with a knife just did not correlate with what they seen at his house. So child, on the spot, the police arrested Mike's ass, which this is the energy that we need today, okay? And just like that, Mike was arrested for murder and handcuffed. Now get this, y'all, when police conducted a second, more thorough search of his home, they found a receipt for an 18-inch long machete. But not only that, they went into his garage and found 2 handmade coffins, one for Charles and a small one made for Doreen. They also found body bags, weights, and the map of the San Francisco Bay. So his plan was later revealed to be him dumping off Charles and Doreen's body in the Bay of San Mateo Bridge. Now, initially Mike denied having anything to do with Doreen's murder, and despite all the evidence that's been found, he was released just 48 hours later. Now, this is the bullshit. This is the bullshit that gets me tight. It's like, how much more evidence do you need? I know there's a process. I know there's a technical legal procedure with all of this shit, but regardless of that, I just feel like they need to follow the procedures on a case-by-case basis. Like, some cases, it's just like blatant evidence that points to a suspect with all the motive, physical evidence. At least hold the man until you find more concrete evidence. I get there's a way to do it. Everyone's innocent until proven guilty, but it's like, I just feel like in a general sense, lives could be saved, time could be less wasted if something seems obvious and they just able to at least hold the person who is a primary suspect of the case with given reasoning, you know? However, 3 days after he was let out on November 4th, 1984, Mike was arrested and charged for her murder. Now, this happened after they were able to match Mike's blood type to the one that was found on the scene. So this was more concrete evidence and physical proof that he was at the scene that night where the murder took place. Now, being charged with murder with special circumstances means that this gave way for a more harsher punishment. So so this would make him eligible for the death penalty. Detectives were also able to trace back the wolf mask that Mike had on with one that he wore at a Halloween party just the year before. So Mike's dumbass really wore the same wolf mask that he was seen wearing and was confirmed wearing by witnesses at the party that he wore at the scene. Mike went on trial in July 1988, so 4 years after the murder took place. And surprisingly, he pled guilty to the first-degree murder of Doreen and the second-degree murder of her unborn fetus, which is just so ridiculously sad. Like, I feel like it's just, you just have to be so angry and evil to really cut out, like, I can't even, like, to cut out a baby out of her stomach. You know what I mean? And what makes it the more sad and crazy and ironic is the fact that she was having a baby boy. You know what I mean? So it's like she was being given a chance of another baby boy after she just lost one. I'm sure Mike was probably upset about that, especially considering the fact that he really did genuinely blame Doreen for their son's death. But you could have at least given another boy a chance. That was no reason to take away the life of another baby boy. He would be eventually sentenced to death by the gas chamber and is currently sitting on death row in San Quentin State Prison. I'm sure most of you true crime fans already know that it takes years and years and years for people to follow through with their death row sentence. Now, Charles and Deanna Scott says that for their peace of mind, they have forgiven Mike, but I can only imagine how they feel, especially on every Halloween season, not having his wife, her mother, and his son and her brother. But I understand why sometimes the victim's family will choose to just forgive the killer, because there's nothing that they could do and they just want their peace of mind at the end of the day. It's not for the killer, but it's for themselves. But y'all, that is the case of Doreen Erbert. This case is just crazy. It's just so crazy. I can only imagine how Deanna felt actually being there and witnessing all of that. This story is definitely haunting and one for the Halloween true crime books. But as always, I want to know what you guys think. Comment down what you guys think below. Follow my Instagram and my Snapchat at Chrissyy, 2 S's 2 Y's. I love and appreciate you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this Halloween true crime story, the first of the spooky season. But again, I love and appreciate you guys, and I'll see y'all in my next video. Bye, guys.
She the God, she the God, she the God.